Welcome back for part two. Part two, we're talking about again Florida. You can see here Florida, see Floridians, Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, and then we have all of this, and Sinus Mexicanus, Cuba, Gulf of Mexico right here. And I'm assuming this is the Mississippi. And then there's whatever else. So I'm going to go ahead and read page 216 to finish off. Sorry, I was choked up. This is part two. Let me go ahead and talk again. Okay. Left on 216. Kosa, where they found him, Indians adorned with plumes of feathers and rich fur cloaks, came to meet and welcome them, and to desire them to causticate, to stay there all winter. But Sotis, resolving to go to haven of Achatsi, refused the same. After he viewed Talasis ford with the wooden earthen bulwarks, where the Kauskis, Taliskatsisa, these are S's, a man as big as a ordinary Spaniard, received Sotis with great civility and conducted him to Mavila, lying in a pleasant place, the city surrounded with double palafados filled up with earth. Between them there was also 80 paces distance from one another, stands a tower to contain 80 soldiers, hath two gates, 80 houses, in every one which dwell 1,000 men, and a large marketplace in the middle, where whilst the Spaniards were in the midst of the mist, they sudden heard a great cry of arms, and first assault was made by 7,000, which still ensued by supplies, but the Spaniards had last letting the city on fire, broke through them, and left them even 1,000 slain, either by smoke and flame or by bullets and swords, horses, heels, and dogs. And the Spaniards also lost 83 men and 43 horses. Hence, going to Chicora, they were stopped by the natives before the deep river with the high banks, which last was crossing, not without great trouble and bloodshedding. They withered to the village, Cochia, where the inhabitants let them rest very quietly for 2 months, and at the end of which, joined together in the night, they shot fire into the straw roofs, maintained a fight of 2 hours long, in which the Spaniards lost 40 men, 50 horses, and all their dogs, which they burnt the houses. And thence from going to Chicocola, they were resifted, and in most places in Fort Alibano engaged 4,000 Floridians who waited their coming. But those who were thirdly handled, that half of them were slain, and so this became a matter of the fort, and also of Chisica, which he stormed and took unawares. With no less than trouble and danger did he get over the river El Grande, where he discovered a village that contained above 4,000 houses and many delightful fruit trees. That's a S, Calciquin maintained the Spanish army 6 days in place, and taking 5,000 of the subjects, marched with them to Cafafha, which hath a deep and broad moat with 3 sides thereof. So this Cafafha had a deep moat with 3 sides, and the moat was fortified along the Bedafsalos, which the Spanish breaking them made way to Caciquin, who put all the sword, and the governor only escaping in a canoe to a neighboring island, the interest being taken by the Spaniards that Caciquin returned home. After which Sotis concluded a peace with the Cacifes, the governor, and took up his quarters in the village of Ventanague, where he received continual solace, but taking 15 Caciques prisoners to threaten to burn them alive unless they would procure him some gold. But not being able to get any, they only had their hands cut off and were sent away. Moreover, Sotis helped the Ganchakoyas to ruin. Those of Antacol, which design proved successful, not according to Sotis' desire, for he found not the gold mines which he expected, and spent in this 5 years progress of the great treasure he took out of the Ictibaliba's palace and the pearls which he got from Florida. For the oysters being open against fire and the pearls drilled through with hot iron lost much of their luster. Neither would his people content to consent to build a city on a haven of Achufi. In the midst of the transaction, Sodus died of the bloody flux, and his body was entered into the river of El Grande, after which his successful Leviticus de Alaveredo had worse success, for half of the army being wasted away by the excessive heat, and the rest revolved to the desert Florida, utterly despairing to ever be able to resist the valiant natives. In the province of Achi, they procured a guide, whom, because he misled them in their way, they caused him to be torn in pieces by their dogs, after which they marched without a guide through such bad ways that they lost 100 of their men, 80 horses, besides many of the Floridians that carried their luggage. At last, coming to the river Angrade, they conquered 2 villages, which fortified and which they took their winter quarters in them. But this being the 14th year, which the rivers usually overflow to drown all the adjacent countries, it's not like the Mississippi. It's the 14th year where the river overflows to drown all the 14 counties adjacent to, on all of them, the great amazement, the wood, which they gathered for the building of the barkers to carry them home, was washed away, the provisions spoiled, and the inhabitants drowned, and inconvenience was added to another greater, for the governors around about waste all the forces they could probably to revenge them on the Spaniards and for their great oppression. But Alaverdo, being informed of this design by the Cacique and Nilco, caused 30 of abettors of the plot to have their hands cut off. Not long after the Spaniards set sail, when 1,000 canoes came engaged with them, lay 15 days among them, killing and wounding several of the seamen, and sunk a barque and 48 men, and also killed many horses which were not yet on the shore. The prisoners they took strapadidoed to death, and the horses slot. Yet some of them got safe from Panicu to Mexico. So this is Mexico. These above-mentioned expeditions to Florida, notwithstanding that they fell unfortunately nevertheless by the permission of Philip II, King of Spain, Peter Hadmamando and Julio Semeno, with 5 Dominican monks, in another attempt landed with several great crosses, and therefore they may reduce the Floridians' whole language, and they understood not to their faith, but fearing treachery revisited upon them, and killed the monks with clubs, slaying them and hung their skins in their temples. Notwithstanding these and many worse accidents that happened, yet the Spanish king ventured once more and sent Peter Menendez to Florida, where he was followed by 3 Jesuits of Rome, Verger, Peter Menendez, John Roger, and Francis Villevagas, and the master of the ship which were sent around the ignorant was judged to the covenant to the land, whereupon 9 Netherlands and 4 Spaniards amongst which was Martinez, went ashore to Florida. Well, as the storm, it's probably a hurricane, which drove the ship to Cuba, which means that the whole landed here left in a miserable condition, having no food but wild herbs, which they fed on for 12 days, so this expedition also came into nothing. At last the French, following the footsteps of the Spaniards, Jean Ribard and Jean Ladumane, having sailed several times to Florida, discovered several coasts, but their men were often set upon by the Spaniards and cut off. Let me pause this here.